So we finally have the start of Amazon's The Wheel of Time Season 3. And I've got to say, call me optimistic, maybe even call me a fool, but from what I've seen from the first 3 episodes, I think it is an improvement over the first 2 seasons. Now, then again, Season 2 started off the same way. Season 2 started and I was like, it's not the books, but it's an improvement. Where Season 3 is like this weird hybrid of like, it wants to be the books, it tries to do things from the books, but it doesn't always execute it in the most faithful way, or executes it in a way that's a bit too much style over substance. But for the most part, I would say that season 3 so far from the first 3 episodes has been the most book accurate season. Now, something I do want to preface is the fact that yes, I have not liked this show in the past. I've been very vocal about the fact that I don't like this show in the past. But I'm moving forwards in my life. I'm growing. I'm trying to appreciate the good. I'm trying to appreciate the bad. And at the same time too, I do like the Wheel of Time series itself, like the books. I'm currently on the last book, and bear in mind too, I'm also not like a book purist in the sense of like, when it comes to adapting the book, yes, the show makes some very awful changes, specifically with like the Eye of the World and the Great Hunt and such. But that does not mean I think the books themselves are infallible. Like, they're not. Like, there are many things in the books that I take issue with. If you watch my playlist above where I review every Wheel of Time book and such, you will see my issues with the series progress. Like, I started very enthusiastic, and then we get to like the middle bit where I'm like, it's kind of losing me. And then all of a sudden, like, book 7 or 8 happens, and I'm like, whoa, this is great. And then I hit the slog, and now I'm on the last book, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm ready to be done with this book series now. And for the most part, my memory on those books are a bit shaky. Like, I do remember some of the big things that happens, but for the most part, because obviously I've read more books in between, more information has come into my brain, not everything in those books has stuck with me. And yes, whilst I have been harsh on the previous seasons about not adapting the previous books properly, I am still willing to give this show a chance because the trailer got me, it hooked me, and I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. And so they enticed me back in, they pulled me back in. I was done with the show after season 2, but they pulled me back in. And yeah, I'm ready to give this show another chance because I mean, I've seen the first 3 episodes and so far, it's pretty decent. But before we get into my thoughts on the first 3 episodes of The Wheel of Time Season 3, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on social media. It's all linked down in the description. I'm also an actor and filmmaker myself, so check out my latest short film, The Shining Optimism of E.F. Manar. Also, considering that you're watching a Wheel of Time video, I'm also going to assume that you're also a fantasy lover. And if that's the case, check out the link in the description to my Indiegogo campaign for my upcoming fantasy short film, The Singer's Tale. Any contribution, be as little or greater than £1, is more than appreciated. And yes, with all that out of the way, let's get into my thoughts on Amazon's The Wheel of Time Season 3. Okay, so first thing I want to address is the cinematography. It is a step up, I think. I can't really tell. And I say that only in the sense of, like, it looks like the previous 2 seasons, but now they shoot it in the 239:1 aspect ratio. So it has the cinematic bars. It looks more quote-unquote cinematic. And yeah, so far, it looks really good. My only, like, little nitpick is that I wish they would deepen the blacks just, like, a tiny bit more. And then we get to, like, our first major scene of the episode, which is Leandrin's trial by the Amalensi. And honestly, this scene I'm a bit mixed on, because for the most part, I enjoyed watching it. But at the same time, too, there's a lot of style over substance in this action set piece. I do want to say that Kate Fleetwood is an absolute gem and is one of the show's highlights. Like, her performance as Leandrin is exceptional. And yeah, we get this big melodramatic action set piece with the Aes Sedai, and that's the thing, like, it's big, and yes, you can see there is more budget on screen, but at the same time too, the way it's filmed, especially with like the excessive use of slow-mo, it feels a bit melodramatic. And not to mention, too, there are some bits that do just look absolutely silly. Like, when Alana's 2 warders are, like, banging on the door, it's the most, like, corny-looking thing ever, where they're just like, let us in! Alana, let us in! And yeah, we then find out that Moraine, Rand, Elaine, Egwene, Nynaeve, Matt, Perrin, they're all in Tarvalon, even though they were all in Farm before, so I don't know why they traveled all the way back to Tarvalon, because Moraine is also banished from Tarvalon. And they say that they are going to Tyr to get Calendor. Now, a couple of things. One, this season is basically flipping books 3 and 4 around in the sense of, like, in books 3, Rand went off to Tyr to claim the Sword of Calendor. The sword that isn't a sword, which I will say, that was also a cool little reference, like when Matt says the sword that isn't a sword in the Old Tongue. That was cool. But instead, by the end of the episode, Rand decides to go to the Aiel Waste in order to become the Karakan. Now, something I will say in comparison to the previous 2 seasons is that this season has a lot more fun. Like the scene with Matt and the sketch artist where Matt gets him to draw a picture of him with the Horn of Valir. That was really funny. Like, that was really enjoyable. Though, it was kind of stupid that Matt was able to walk around freely with the Horn of Valir. I mean, they addressed it in like episode 3, I think. And for the sake of the joke, I thought it was really fun, but at the same time too, like in universe, it's a bit stupid that he's allowed to freely walk around with the Horn of Valir. But then also too, Loyal has a really funny line where like, you know, Moraine's like, all right, we leave at dawn. And then he's just like, leave at dawn? Why is it always that they want to leave at dawn? What's wrong with having a hearty breakfast? Like, that was really funny. I really enjoyed that. Though, speaking of sketches, one thing that did, like, kind of annoy me is that they referenced, like, the book thing of Rand fighting Ishamael in the sky. And they have a sketch artist of Rand fighting Ishamael. And it's like they're flying in the sky and there's, like, lightning and stuff. But I'm like, don't do that to me. Like, don't pay, like, homage and reference to that show. Like, you gave me, like, the worst anticlimactic action set piece to season 2. And you try and do that? Like, no, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, that's just silly. That's dumb. Like, to me, as someone who really wanted to see that done in live action on the, you know, silver screen, felt like a middle finger to me.
Fuck you! Fuck yeah!
Now, there is something they do in this episode that I am mixed on and or kind of don't like, but also too, I can see why they did it. They made Avienda and Elaine a couple, and just on the one hand, I can see it because yes, the concept of a sister wife in the books, the whole like Aiel thing of like sharing and such, the whole like bond between Rand, Elaine, and Min, and it does make sense for the show to change it a little bit and have them, instead of being sister wives, it makes them in like a thruple or a quadruple or whatever. But then at the same time too, I can see the argument of you ruined a perfectly healthy female, you know, friendship for the sake of like cheap sex. And because of that too, I can't tell what Elaine and Rand's dynamic is. Like, did Elaine and Rand just become friends? Or like, are they trying to tease their future romance? Because it's a bit weird. Like, she says all these deep and insightful things to him that are really like heartfelt, but then like, they haven't had their romance that they're supposed to have in The Dragon Reborn and forwards. Then we get this vision with Egwene, and I gotta say, the vision that Egwene sees in the Archers of long-haired Mad Rand was pretty cool. Like, Joshua Stradowski this season is having a lot of fun. They're giving him a lot more things to do. We also have this scene where they get to play Maiden's Kiss. Now, the thing about this scene is that it is very fun, but then at the same time too, it's one of the problems I have with the show, where it's, they pay homage to the books, but it's more like a cheap Easter eggs rather than feeling organic to the show. Because the show, especially the first 2 seasons, are so unlike the books, when we get something that is very akin to the books, like Maiden's Kiss, it feels very key jangly. It feels like, hey, you're a book fan, you appreciate this reference, rather than it feeling like an organic piece to the world. Again, it's cheap Easter eggs to get book fans to keep watching and making them feel a bit excited of, oh, they made reference to this, I know this thing from the book. Also, there's something off about the costumes this season, because for the most part, the costumes are incredible. They are one of the show's highlights. But then there are certain things like Rand's pajamas that just feel very modern, and like the costume department didn't give it enough thought. Like, he's pretty much just wearing regular pajamas. And for me, one of the most shocking parts of the episode was the scene with Matt and the cards and the mirrors and the multiple Rands, and just that scene shocked me because it's something from the books, and I completely forgot that it happened in the books. And so when it happened in the show, I was like, whoa, this scene is nuts. This is like creepy, but also really cool. This is insane. I'm really digging this. That is until we find out that the reason why this happened was because Moraine made a ploy with Lanfear to create this like weird, creepy illusion immersion thing so that Rand would leave Tarvalon and go to Tyr, but instead he decides to go to the Aiel Waste. Again, what is it with this show and corrupting Moraine? Like, this is so villainous, so heinous. Why did they do that? I don't get it. In the books, this series of events happens because there's like a ripple in like the Dark One's prison, the Dark One's trying to escape, and there's like something weakening, and therefore this like magical like energy like expels, and then we get this weird creepy sequence with like the cards and stuff. But to change that reasoning and have Moraine work with Lanfear, it doesn't make any sense. It makes Moraine look really evil. It just, what is this show doing? I don't get it. So to end the episode, Rand goes off to the Aiel Waste, Nynaeve and Elaine go back to Tarvalon, and Perrin is going back to the Two Rivers to complete his arc from the Shadow Rising. Overall, I liked the episode, for the most part. There are things in it, specifically the stuff with Moraine and Lanfear, that I do not like, because I don't know why they made that change. Like, yes, Moraine in the books does the Dumbledore thing where she tells, like, half-truths in order to tell, like, the bigger truth, but it's all in, like, service for the greater good. And to have the show completely change that, to have her, like, end up working with an evil Forsaken, just, it doesn't make any sense to me as, like, a book fan. Like, that's just weird. Like, even as a show fan, too. Like, Lanfear is a villain in season 2. Why is Moraine working with the villain? Like, that's such a cliche modern storytelling thing. Like, we don't need that. So the opening with Morghese Trakan really confused me because what the hell? Like, I don't even mean that in like a good way. I was baffled because Morghese in the books is not meant to be this villainous person. Like, her killing all the houses and their successors, it didn't make any sense. I watched that and I was like, since when is Morghese this cold-blooded? Like, huh? Also, one of the things I found really funny in this episode was Moraine's little sun hat. Like, they're walking through, like, the fields. Rand and Lan are trading, which is, hey, cool, that we finally got that. Like, it only took them 2 seasons, but we got Rand and Lan training. And then we have Rosamund Pike walking around with, like, her little, like, purple shirt. And then she's just got this sun hat. And I'm like, this is so out of place. This is what I mean about how the costuming this season just feels a bit all over the place. One thing that they did is that when Perrin goes back to the Two Rivers, Loial is with him, and Loial opens the gateway, and the gateways, for the most part, they are done like the gateways are in the books. They have a little leaf key, and then it opens and closes and such, and I'm like, okay, they changed it to make it fit more like the books, but then also too, if you watch it in the context of the show, in season 1, that's not how the gateways work. But then again too, there are like deleted scenes in season 1 that showcase them doing the gateways properly. Like, there are leaf keys, and Padam Fane was supposed to show up in the finale, but they didn't really, like, you know, add that into the finale. They cut it out. So I guess props for them for making the gateways more book accurate, I guess. One thing too about the characterization of Morghese is that she just feels very antagonistic this episode. Like, I don't know, there was something about it where she was walking around Tarvalon, interacting with the Amelin Sea and the rest of the Aes Sedai, and I was like, this doesn't feel like the Morghese from the books. And speaking of House Trakan, we get introduced to Garwin and Galad, and I gotta say, I like the actors. I think they do a good job, and I think the show has some fun with them. You know, them being the pretty handsome princes that go to the tower to train to become warders, and then, like, all the girls are swooning after them and such. Like, I don't know. I liked that to a point, but then also, too, there are some moments that are just so cheesy, like when they're sparring, and the girls are like, oh, it's Garwin and Galad, and they're, like, swooning, and they're just like, ah... bit overdone in my opinion. Like, the way it comes across in camera is just like really cheesy and over the top. Like, if they just toned it back a little bit, yeah, it would have been pretty fun. But it's just so much like, oh, like borderline like pantomime acting. Also, a question I have for the episode, and more so the season itself, is what is Matt doing in the tower? Like, what is he actually doing? In the books, it made sense because he was being healed from the dagger. But in season 1/season 2, he was already healed from the dagger. But in season 3, he's in the tower because he blew the Horn of Alea and they're like studying him or something. Like, why is he actually here in the tower? I mean, I know why. It's so they can adapt the Garwin and Galad fight because, I mean, that was something. I thought they weren't going to do that. Like, in episode 2, it's like, oh yeah, they have him training with the quarterstaff. And then, like, I'm like, okay, they're going to have him fight Garwin and Galad. But then they didn't. And I was like, oh man, we couldn't even get that. But then put a pin in that because yes, that comes back in episode 3. And now getting to Perrin in the Two Rivers. So when we get to Perrin in the Two Rivers, they make a change that I'm not really entirely for, which is they don't have Perrin's entire family be killed by the White Cloaks. When that happened in the books, that was one of the most shocking moments, and I was like, oh my god, they went there. That is insane. That is like so heartbreaking. It's one of like the best moments in The Shadows Rising. But the show didn't adapt it, and I don't really know why, because why would you not adapt it? That moment is so like shocking and heartbreaking, and they didn't adapt it in the show, and it's like you kind of took out like a lot of Perrin's motivation for his arc in this season, because the whole point is that he wants to fight the White Cloaks and the Trollocs, rise up to become the leader that he's meant to be for the sake of his family. But it doesn't really matter because his family is fine. But at the same time too, I didn't dislike this episode. This episode did things that I didn't like, but I didn't dislike it overall. As like an episode of TV, yeah, it was alright. So episode 3, in my opinion, was the weakest, or at least the episode I was least interested in when watching. Though there are good things in this episode. They did the Samael reveal very early. Like, Queen Morghese's like assistant lover thing, Samael, he's a Forsaken. And the show just, instead of keeping it a mystery, because in the books it's a mystery for like several books, the show just goes, yep, he's a Forsaken. And I don't think that it's entirely bad, because yes, when he shows up in the previous episode, you're kind of like, okay, this guy can't be trusted. Like, everyone loves him, but there's something off about him. And so then bringing forward the reveal that he's a Forsaken doesn't really ruin it for me. There's also a scene that I really like, and that's the scene between Suan and Matt, where Suan tells Matt that he is a hero. Like, he blew the Horn of Valor. He does the right thing, especially when he doesn't want to. Like, that's a good scene. Like, when Suan tells him, oh, isn't that what a hero is? That's a good moment. I really liked that. It made Suan actually more likable. I think this is the most likable she's been throughout the previous 2 seasons. One thing that this episode did, and I didn't entirely love or gel with, was the fact that they really want us to care about this Matt and Min friendship that they established in season 2, which I liked in season 2, until Min sold him out to a Shamael, because her reasoning for it was a bit dumb. Just like, oh, he can take away my visions, but why would you trust him? He's a dark friend. He's a Forsaken. Especially too, that this like thing just kind of ruins Min's characterization. Like, I wasn't a fan of Min's casting in season 1. Like, she was too much older than the rest of the cast. And in season 2, they make her a bit more playful, but then they do the big reveal with the Shamael, and I'm like, no, that's dumb. And then this season, it's like, they're trying to like win her back. They're trying to make her more reasonable, but at the same time too, just didn't sit right with me. They already kind of like ruined her character in the previous 2 seasons, and them kind of like bringing in this conflict to like resolve Min's character, it's not doing it for me. There's also a fair few scenes with the Aes Sedai in the White Tower this episode. Like, we get Elena and Nynaeve being recruited by Sawan to essentially hunt down the Black Aja, which is basically their thing for like several books. They're just in the White Tower hunting down the Black Aja. We also get to see more of Elijah this episode, because yes, she was introduced in the previous episode, and we see more of Elijah walking around the tower, like trying to win people over and such. Like, the show does something where they basically make it obvious that Elijah is evil, and the actress they picked, I don't remember her name. Like, she does a good job and such, and I think she is good casting for Elijah. But there is something that this season does, and to be fair, season 2 does it as well, where they kind of get rid of the whole ageless face thing for the Aes Sedai. And I get it, it is kind of hard to do, like, the faceless, ageless thing. But then again, too, I think the whole point was that maybe the way they could have done it is that they should have casted younger and then aged them up with makeup, or kind of just kept to the casting where they got actors like Rosamund Pike in their middle years, but at the same time, they do look incredibly youthful for their age. That's kind of like a critique, because obviously in season 1, it seemed like they tried to keep that illusion of like the ageless, faceless beauty, and then as the rest of the seasons played out, they just went like, it's fine. We don't really need to worry about that detail from the books. Now, going to Perrin and the Two Rivers subplot. So, the thing about Perrin and the Two Rivers subplot is that, yes, he goes to, like, this big orchard where, like, you know, the people are buried, and he goes and sees Lila, his wife from season 1, that shouldn't have existed, but, you know, the show did its thing. And for me, the whole thing with Perrin and the Two Rivers has kind of just lost its impact because they didn't kill off his family in the previous episode. And it's kind of just like, yeah, I get it, he's meant to be there so he can become the leader he needs to be and such. Like, that's Perrin's thing from the book, but I don't know, there's like an impact to it that's lessened because like he hasn't gone back home and realized his entire family is gone. And one thing too was that they were really playing with that fail reveal. They were really like dragging it out. They were really kind of like savoring it, because again, in many ways, it felt like they were doing the whole Easter egg thing of just like, oh, you know Fail, that's Perrin's wife in the books. But let's talk about the best thing in this episode, which is Matt versus Garwin versus Galad, because yes, this scene was really good. It was really cool. It was really fun to see. They did the thing from the book, and yes, they kind of did make it style over substance. And yes, the choreography and the filmmaking was a bit overdone, but for the most part, I really enjoyed it because it's one of Matt's best moments from the books, and it's so well done for the most part in the show. Like, again, yes, action-wise, it's style over substance. The editing is too much. The shaky cam is a bit much, but there are a lot of cool things in this moment. Like, Donald Flynn is an absolute gem. He is the best thing about this show. When he tells Garwin and Galad, mate, just have a day off. Because, you know, they were trying to be overly chivalrous towards Nynaeve, and it's kind of just like, listen, him and Nynaeve, they're talking, they're having a conversation, they're just like overstepping their way into their conversation. It's just, it was a really great moment. Like, Donald Flynn is so great as Matt. And I really did like the bit where he was like, let's dance, but he said it in the old tongue. So good. Genuinely so good. This was a great scene. I loved it. So those were my thoughts on season. So those were my thoughts on the first 3 episodes of The Wheel of Time season 3. And I've got to say, the show so far is an improvement. It's not perfect for sure, but at the same time too, I can definitely and safely say that so far it's the best season of the Wheel of Time. Like, the show has kind of evolved to this point to where, like, it is the books, but it's not the books. And I'm kind of just taking the show right now for what it is, because also, too, like I've said, I'm not, like, a book purist in the sense of, I've only read the books, like, once, and I haven't even finished reading the books. I'm on the last book, but yeah, I'm not, like, an overall, like, purist for the Wheel of Time. And so when they make changes to the show that, for the most part, aren't, like, obtrusive, I don't mind it. But yeah, so far, despite the making changes that I am against because it does ruin the overall, like, narrative flow of the season. For example, Perrin's Two Rivers subplot has been compromised. Moraine is actively working with Lanfear and such. Like, those changes, I don't like. But for the most part, when I'm watching the episodes, I don't go, this show sucks, I hate it. No, I actually, like, had a decent time. Like, I don't do numerical scores, but if I was to rate the episodes, yeah, they range from, like, a 7 out of 10. Like, they're pretty enjoyable for the most part. There are moments in them that are definitely like 8 and 9s, like again, Matt versus Gawain versus Glad. That was good fun. That was a really good scene. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, for the most part, season 3 of The Wheel of Time has started off considerably strong, I'd say. Like, don't take this as me, like, backpedaling in my opinion of the show. I still don't think the show is incredible, but I would say that this is the best season. Whether or not it continues to be that way, who knows? Because again, I've experienced season 2. Even when I thought season 2 itself was being somewhat entertaining, it then took a hard turn in the later episodes, and I was like, oh no, this show isn't good at all. I will be back in the future to give you my thoughts on the rest of the episodes and to give you my thoughts on the season overall. So those are my thoughts on the first 3 episodes of The Wheel of Time Season 3. What did you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe, follow on social media, all the good stuff. Until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.